Hello again, vacationers, travelers, and locals of the North Georgia mountains. Jimmy here with you again from Restoration Retreat. Now, usually we're on our way to a park, some cool place to visit, or a restaurant to eat at to highlight those places and show you what they're all about for the purposes of making it easier for anybody who stays here at Restoration Retreat or anybody who visits the North Georgia mountains to be able to find something to do when they're in the area. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We're not going to go visit a place to eat or a fun place to go. I have had in the past people inquire about our Adirondack chairs around the fire pit that we have here. I've had a number of people ask me, where did you get those chairs and where can I get some? Well, the truth of the matter is I built all of these chairs myself. And the process for building them is fairly simple. I've had a lot of people inquire about how to build them. So this video today is going to show you how to assemble these Adirondack chairs step by step. Now, when I first started building these chairs, I built them out of regular lumber, not treated. And my thought process was I could build them out of the regular lumber, treat them, and they'd probably hold up pretty well in the elements. However, as you could see on those chairs, they've got a little bit of a darkening to them. So what I'm gonna have to do now is I'm gonna have to pressure wash them and retreat them again. So all that said to say, from now on, when I build the Adirondack chairs, I'm going to be building them out of pressure treated lumber so that hopefully they'll last a bit longer. Now, don't think that just because it's pressure treated that you don't have to do anything to it, that you can just stick it outside and it'll be just fine. It will last for a lot longer than regular lumber, but even though it's pressure treated, it still needs to be, it still needs to have a coat of a water sealer or a paint or something applied to it to help it last even longer. So with the pressure treated wood, when you purchase it, you'll notice that it's a lot heavier. It feels kind of moist. And that's because of the treatment that they put in the wood. So when you build the chair out of the pressure treated wood, what you're gonna have to do is let it sit for about 30 days so that it can dry up. And then after that, you can sand it and treat it with your water sealer or your paint or whatever you choose. So now that you've decided you're going to build your own Adirondack chairs on your own, let's go over some of the materials and the equipment that you're going to need for this.
To complete this project, you'll need the following: 3 8-foot 2x4s, 4 8-foot 1x4s, and 1 8-foot 2x2. And you'll also need the tools listed.
I just got back from the hardware store just a little bit ago and I selected the materials that I wanted to build my chairs. And again, I got the 3 8-foot 2x4s, the 4 8-foot 1x4s, and the 1 8-foot 2x2. Now, I personally like to go with the natural wood look as opposed to painting them. And when I make my wood selection at the store, I'm pretty particular about the pieces of wood that I get because some of the wood in there is really, really beautiful. So you can kind of sift through the pieces and find some of the more naturally beautiful pieces of wood, particularly the armrests, the seat slats, and the back slats. And I'm going to show you that here in just a second. Here we have 3 completed Adirondack chairs that I finished yesterday. And I want to point out to you some of my purposeful placement of some of the boards. And you can see on the backrest of this chair, there's some knotting of the wood. It's got this speckled look to it that I think is just really pretty. It's got some shades of green through it, just the natural grain of the wood. And you can see here on these armrests how really beautiful just the wood in its natural state can appear. Now you can also, instead of just applying a water sealer to it, you can apply a stain, you know, and that can further enhance the natural beauty of the wood. So now that you have your wood, I am going to provide for you some templates, measurements that you will need to cut your pieces of wood to. So I'm gonna go ahead and follow that chart now. I'm gonna cut out all my pieces and get them prepped and ready to go. When I have them cut and ready to begin the assembly process, we'll pick it up from there.
The following images are the specifications that you'll need to cut your materials to for building the chair. This particular image is important. You'll need to cut your 1x4 pieces to these specifications in order to have enough wood for the project.
Don't forget, definitely need something to protect your eyes. So here's a quick tip. This small beveled cut here that's marked on the instructions as 90 degrees, it's going to be 90 degrees off of this angle here. Now the reason for that is because when this support comes upon that front leg, you're going to want that 90-degree cut right here so that your armrest sits flat and level to it. Okay, so I've marked and I've cut all my 2x4 pieces, and now I'm moving on to the 1x4 pieces. But there's really something important that I need to point out about marking and cutting the 1x4 pieces.
Being as I've made this mistake more than once myself, I wanted to be sure that we covered it more than once here in this video so that you don't make the same mistake I did.
Okay, so now we've cut all our pieces, and I recommend keeping some organization to these pieces because there are a couple of pieces that are cut to similar lengths, could be easy to confuse, and if you screw the wrong piece in the wrong place, you're certainly going to know it at some point in time and then have to go back and correct it. But we're going to take our pieces now, and I will take you step by step through the assembly process of the chair. I want to point this out also. You don't have to be a professional to be able to create a really nice quality chair. I'm not a carpenter. Woodworking is definitely not my trade, but I enjoy working in the shop. I enjoy working with the tools. So being able to go in there and have fun with it really helped in getting better at what I do in the learning process. So it took me a few chairs to be able to kind of learn from my mistakes. And as we go through the assembly process of these chairs, I will point out some of the more common mistakes that I made myself and ways to prevent or correct them. The first part of our chair that we're going to assemble will be the legs on each side of it. So we have one of our front legs, one of our rear legs, and this cross member support that goes in between the legs. Now, when we assemble this part, it's really critical to make sure that everything is nice and square. Otherwise, the chair isn't going to sit level. You ever sit in a chair and one leg doesn't touch the ground and just kind of teeters back and forth between the two? Getting this nice and square and assembling in this way is really important to prevent that from happening. So, this is my table that my saw was on, and I have a couple of different purposes for this, but this is a perfectly square piece of plywood, and I'm going to use this to keep my legs square when I assemble this together. So another point, when you put this one together, make sure you do the other one in the opposite way so that you don't have two exact same sides, because of course they need to be mirrors of one another to function properly in the chair. So here we have our rear leg and our front leg placed. And this cross member support, this angled cut here is going to go to the rear leg, and I line it up and square it up exactly at the base right here. Where the tip of this angle comes is going to be right where the back corner of this leg touches the ground. So that's going to need to be nice and square and lined up. And what I'll do is I will make sure this is square. I'll put 2 screws in here, and then what I'll do is I will make sure that the front leg is going to be square, again using my board here, making sure both legs are nice and flush. And I'm going to measure from the top of this leg support down to the top of this cross member support to make sure that both sides are even when we put the chair together. All right, that's square, that's flush. And for this part of the construction, you're going to want to use your 2.5-inch deck screws. Checking again to make sure that we are nice and square on our squared piece of plywood here that I'm using as a marker. I'm going to line up the front leg, and I'm going to use this old cut piece of 2x4 here to make sure that my measurement across this is square as well, because this is the side of the chair. There's going to be a cross member that affixes to the front part of this, which we'll get to in a minute, but I use this right here to help make sure that everything is spaced and lined up properly. So now moving on, we've got the front and the rear leg with the cross member support screwed on. It's all square. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this front apron support and we're going to screw it on right here in the position that it's in. All right, so here's the right side of the chair. The seat will be right here, rear leg, front leg. And again, we affixed this front apron support here. Now, we want to make sure that it sits level like this because our seat slats are going to begin here and then go down. And also for this part right here, again, is the 2.5-inch deck screws. So what we have completed now is essentially the base of our chair. Now, in other plans that I've read before, they tell you to take these components, your 2x2s, which are the supports for the armrests, and they will tell you to go ahead and affix these in place before you put the cross members on. Now, I don't do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, if we assemble the chair like this with the feet flat on the floor, what it does is it helps to ensure that it is going to be level. And the other reason is because when you go to put the seat slats on, this kind of gets in the way to be able to get the screws through the seat slats nice and square. Otherwise, they'll be on an angle. So we will put the seat slats on now. And here's your front apron support. Here's the rear apron support. And what I do when we start to assemble this is I will place this right here so that as we put the seat slats on, it's going to ensure that everything stays nice and square. Okay, we're getting ready to put the seat slats on. A few things to point out to you real quick. Now, we talked about how nice and pretty the wood can be. So here comes a point in time when you want to decide which side of the wood you want facing up. So I've picked this side of this piece because it's got, those nice little speckles in it. This side doesn't have it. So to me, the side seems a little more decorative. So I'm definitely going to use this side up wherever I put it out in the seat slats. Also, the seat slats I've pre-drilled with my 7/64 bit, and that way that helps to keep the wood from splitting whenever you screw through it. And one final tip on putting the seat slats on, the first seat slat will sit flush against the front. To space them properly, I've just taken another piece of 1x4, and when I put my seat slat in position, I space it with that 1x4, make sure that it's flush on each side, and then screw it in, and I do that all the way down with the rest of the slats. Okay, we've completed putting the seat slats on, and I mentioned to you taking the rear apron support and putting it here for proper spacing. In addition to that, this is going to be the lower portion of the seat back support. It'd be a good idea to put this in between these as well, because it's been my experience in the past where this piece has become so snug, you got to kind of like condense it in with a hammer to get it to go in place. And then one of the problems you can run into with that is that if you use a little too much force, it can tweak the whole chair, and then we get into that out of balance problem that we talked about that we've been trying to avoid the whole time. And I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but for the seat slats, when we're screwing them in, we're using our 1 1/4 inch deck screws. So we're gonna get set up. We're gonna start putting the seat back together, and we're gonna get to that next. Here's our seat back, all set up. It's kind of laid down. We're getting ready to start putting it together. Down here is that 2x4, the lower seat back support. And then right here is the 1x4 that runs all the way across underneath this, is the upper seat back support. Again, I looked over the wood to see which side I thought was the prettiest, to obviously have that side facing out. And here again is another purpose for my table. You see the line that I've drawn right here on the table? That line is square. And what that does is it helps me to keep the bottom support and the top support in line with one another. And I've also marked 22 inches on my board here as well. And what that does is it spaces from the bottom of this board to the bottom of this board 22 inches, so that the chairs, as I assemble each one, they are all the same. So now, like we did with the seat slats, we're gonna pre-drill the 1x4s to help prevent them from splitting. In the assembly of this part, down here when we're affixing the slats to the 2x4, you're gonna use a 2-inch deck screw. And then up high, when it's a 1x4 onto the 1x4 upper seat back support, we're gonna be using a 1 1/4 inch deck screw. Now we're going to create the decorative arc across the top of the chair. And you can measure it to your own specifications, make it however you like. Some people will actually just create beveled cuts in the top. How I prefer just doing a nice clean arc across the top. So what I do to create that arc is I'll measure up from the bottom, make sure that I'm staying right in the center of this 1x4. I'll measure up 13 inches, and I will place a push pin right here in the wood as my mark. And then I'll take a pencil with a string on it. I'll place the pencil at the top, get as close to the top as I can. Right about there. And then on this arc, I'll just take my pencil and run it across the board to get the arc that I want. And again, you can make it higher to change the arc. You can make it lower to change the arc, whatever you prefer for the back of your chair. So now that I've got my mark here, I'll get my jigsaw and cut this out. Now before I start cutting, I'm going to put a little bit of support underneath the top of the chair because it can bounce around quite a bit. So I'll just take a couple of extra pieces of 1x4, place them underneath the top of the chair here, being sure to avoid the line where I'm going to cut. And that'll give me a whole lot more stability, and it'll keep the boards from vibrating and make the cut a lot smoother across the top. So here we have the finished cut. I've got my nice arc across the top, and when I finish, the jigsaw can leave some rough edges. So I just took a piece of sandpaper and smoothed off the edges, and it gave us a nice clean arc. Moving right along. Now we're going to take the armrest supports and we are going to affix them to the chair. You notice that I've got it on its side. It just makes attaching these pieces a whole lot easier. And make sure you drill these because the 2x2s do split very easily. And again, you're going to use a 2.5 inch deck screw, 2 on each end to hold these in place. We'll do this side, flip the chair over, do the other, and then we'll be ready to put the back on the chair. Keeping the chair on its side, we've taken the back that we've assembled and we have slid it in place to become the back of the chair. Now again, this was the lower part of the support that we used as a spacer to make sure that it wasn't going to be too tight. Now it was a little snug and I did have to use a board to kind of tap it in there, and that's not a bad thing. You want it to be good and snug. But when you put this in, you want to make sure that this 2x4, and here's the chair kind of level if you can see it better from that angle, but you want this bottom support to be flush with these supports here. And you also want to make sure that the bottom slats of the back of the chair
also come up against the last slat on the seat of the chair. With the chair still on its side, take your square and put it flush on the seat. Now you don't want the chair to be at a perfect bolt upright angle. So as it sits square at the base, you can see there's a little bit of a gradual gap that comes to close to 1/2 inch at the top of my square. Now, this is just a personal preference. You can make the seat back slant however far back you want. This is just the angle that I choose for my chairs. And now that we've got the proper angle for our seat back, we've made sure that it's the same angle across the whole bottom of the chair here. We're going to screw the bottom slat in. We're going to start up here, put 2 screws in on this side, flip the chair over, make sure our angle is still correct, and then put the other 2 screws in down here. Two screws there. Let's flip it over and get the other side. Now we're nearing completion. The last thing for the seat back that we need to do is we need to put in this back support. Now, this support's going to go, and again, we're leaving the chair on its side. It makes it a lot easier to put this in place for the chair this way. But it doesn't necessarily really matter where this board goes. The only criteria that I have is that I want to make sure that these angles, because it's on an angle, don't extend too far one side or the other of this 2x4 here. That way there's much more board that can come in contact with this board, which can secure it a whole lot better. So, and the other thing is that I want that edge of the 2x4 to fit flush up against the back of that chair, because we're going to be screwing that in to that board once we get this attached, and then we set the chair up right. So now it's really starting to look like a chair. And as it's sitting up right now, we can come back here. This was the cross support that we just put in when the chair was on its side. We flipped it back upright, got it on its legs. We're still level on the ground, and we're about to be done with this project. All right, we're about to wrap up this Adirondack chair. There's only a couple more things that I need to do. That cross support back here that we put in, we're going to use 2-inch deck screws through these slats to affix it there. So the 5 screws right here across. And then the last thing to do will be to secure our armrests here. Now the armrest will sit flush up against the back of the brace back here, so there will be a little bit of an overlap on the front, and that's intended. That's how it's supposed to be. But I'll put 2 screws here, 2 in the rear, 1 here and 1 here. So a total of 6 screws, and these are going to be 1 1/4-inch deck screws for the arm supports. So let me get those screws in, get this completed, and we'll look at it when we're all done. And that's it. Here is our completed Adirondack chair. We went from a stack of lumber to a really pretty chair. It turned out really nice. So I'm all hot and sweaty now. It's not a light project. It's not too horribly bad, but it's a little warm outside today too. Obviously, it's an outdoor project. Unless you have an air-conditioned garage, then I'm jealous and I want one too. Anyhow, so for all of you out there who asked me, how do you build these chairs? Can you tell me how? Can you give me instructions? There you have it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like and subscribe to the Restoration Vacation YouTube channel. Please make sure you comment down below, because we always value your feedback, your input, and thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the next mountaintop or beachside adventure.
Book your next getaway at Restoration Retreat. You can visit us online at myrestorationvacation.com or call us at 800-309-5076. And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to our channel.
For more awesome content on restoration vacations. And make sure you go check out my channel, LPS Pony Tony, and make sure you like and subscribe to my channel too.